been the first female senior bartender at the Savoy's American Bar in over 100 years, and now brand ambassador for one of the oldest gins in the world, you know that making history comes easily to our guest. Now, finding good Wi-Fi in Cornwall, well, that's hard. I'm Susan Schwartz, your drinking companion, and this is Lush Life Podcast. Every week, we are inspired to live life one cocktail at a time. Did I also mention that Pippa Guy is the author of Let's Get Fizzical, a beginner's guide to bubbles and bubbly cocktails? She is not one that is afraid to take on any challenge. Earlier this year, she left the Savoy to open a bar in New York City, only to be waylaid by a global pandemic. Did she let that stop her? Nope. She shifted gears and is now UK brand ambassador for Tanqueray Gin. We'll discover how that happened and what's with the Wi-Fi in Cornwall. Oh, FYI, Pippa mentions an Erik Lorenz and a Jack Sotti on the show. You would know who they were if you had received my weekly newsletter. It's delivered to your inbox every Tuesday with info on what I'm drinking, links to new cocktail recipes, and so much more. You can join the fun by signing up for it at alushlifemanual.com. Now, let's join Pippa. Now, this is the most exciting thing for me, to be having a gin and tonic, a Tanqueray gin and tonic, with the brand new spanking UK brand ambassador for Tanqueray. Thank you so much for being on my show. Wait, I'm going to take one sip. Yum. So it's so exciting. So I want to hear everything new. We'll start new. Usually I start way back when, but I feel like we have to jump right in and talk about this because you are just super new to this. So tell me how it evolved. And because I know you've had this crazy 2020 so far.
Yeah. Well, haven't we all, I guess, in some respects.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a brand new position for me, looking after Tanqueray for the UK, which I've been doing for just over a month now. So it's a completely, different channel of learning for me of figuring out how to do a job in the same industry, but in like a completely opposite respect. So yeah, it all kind of came about. Well, I guess the story sort of starts at the beginning of this year. I had moved to New York to go and open a new bar and restaurant. And then obviously in March, came back home when sort of COVID started taking over the world. And I spent 5 months back at the hospitality of my family and friends, unemployed at home, and then finally got in touch with Jack Sotti, that I believe you also interviewed previously in the Tanqueray role, and started my position in the end of August, 31st of August.
And so the beginning of 2020, this wasn't even in your remit. Like it wasn't even, you weren't nothing. Yes, you're shaking your head, nothing. So you were ready to start a new bar in a new world.
Yeah.
Which was pretty exciting in itself. And how did you feel? Did you feel just super deflated? There was, I'm coming home to this future that I didn't even know what's going to happen.
I guess like in March when I made the decision to come home, it all happened really quickly. So on the Sunday night before I flew home the next day, I still had a full working rota for the next week. We were about a month out from being able to open the bar. And I was on the phone to my mum and she was like, look, this is looking like it's going to be sort of more drastic than we thought. I think maybe you should come home. And I was like, no, like New York's fine at the moment. Like I've still got a full working week. I can't just like pack up and leave. Everyone's like okay over here at the moment. And then I spoke to my sister about 5 a.m. the next morning, who is a doctor, and she was like, no, look, I think we need to take this a bit more seriously. I think you need to have a look at booking a flight and come home, which kind of happened all around the same time as the mayor of New York announcing that bars and restaurants were going to have to close the following day. So I booked a flight that morning to come home, packed an emergency bag and went to the airport that evening. And at that point, like as well, I still left most of my stuff there in my apartment as well, because I kind of thought that like, okay, maybe I'd go home for like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then I come back in like a month's time or whatever when this is all sort of blown over. So maybe a bit naive and blasé on my part, but I guess I don't think any of us thought that.
Of course not. How could we even imagine?
Exactly.
that this would happen. And so when you got back, and I guess when the realization happened that, yes, this was going to be longer than a few weeks, did you start looking for different, jobs or, because it's so dire for bars and restaurants now?
Yeah.
What did you think your future might even hold?
So I wasn't really sure. I stayed with my sister to begin with in Bristol. Her and her partner are both medics, so they were working very long hours. So I was mostly there to kind of support them and be cooking, cleaning, housewife essentially, and look after the dog. And it was, I don't really know what I thought was going to happen in the first few weeks, I guess, actually. I think I still kind of realized that I still thought, that the world was just going to go back to normal in a few weeks' time, and that it was just a kind of like case of weathering the storm and like having a few weeks of good sleep and eating nice and exercising and stuff. And I think sort of after maybe a month of being there, I sort of started to realize that this wasn't really the case, and maybe it's time to start forming some backup plans. So I kind of thought about like short-term and long-term backup plans, I guess. And I wanted to initially sort of try and apply for some jobs that would be helpful to the current situation. So I applied for some jobs within the NHS, like receptionist in the hospitals, whatever, more admin roles. Obviously, I have no medical experience, so not any use in that. And I also applied to be a call handler for 999 and 111, which are like the emergency.
Oh, yeah, of course. How wonderful. Mm. How about that poor bar in New York? Did it, are they thinking of starting again?
To open, I guess it will just be a case of sort of weathering the storm and seeing what happens next year, maybe. New York has, been hit particularly hard. And yeah, I really feel for the guys because it sucks for everyone, really.
You'll tell me when it opens and we will definitely shout it. But so when did Tanqueray come calling, or when did you find out that they needed someone or were looking for you?
Well, I initially saw the advert, I think probably on LinkedIn around March, not long after I'd got back, and got in touch with Jack and was like, hey, what's going on with this? I saw the advert and then it had been removed. So I was like, what's going on with that? Is that going to be an option that will reopen at a later date? And he was like, yeah, we'll still be looking, but currently on like a global hiring freeze, as I'm sure pretty much everyone was at the time. So it was kind of a case of hold tight and we'll get back to you in a few months when we've got a better picture of what the environment's going to look like. Yeah, so, and then I sort of, pretty much just did that, sat tight until about June, July, and I got back in touch with him and he said the role's going to be reopening, and we did some interviews. And actually, this is quite a funny story. My final interview was with Jack and his boss, Vedran. And I was actually on holiday with my family in Cornwall, which has notoriously bad internet connection, which I don't need to tell you about. This is, we've struggled to get this recording off the ground enough times.
Right.
So I did a test run in our like beach cottage, and like it just could not cope with like a Zoom call on any level. So I drove around and like was trying to find anywhere that was open, like a cafe. Obviously it was still shut at that time. And then I found, I think, a Starbucks or somewhere close by that I could sit in my car outside and connect onto their Wi-Fi, and it was strong enough if I was in this one parking spot. So then the next day I drive there for my interview in the morning, and I'm like sat there ready to go, and they're closed, so their internet's off. So I was like panicking and Googled the next nearest Starbucks, drove there, like 20 minutes to go until I'm supposed to be doing this live interview that I've like prepped for. It was quite like in depth as well. Couldn't find that, and there was Marks and Spencer's next door, and I was like, they normally have cafes, maybe I'll go in see. And luckily that was the first day they'd opened.
It was meant to be.
It's lockdown. So I was like, please, can I sit in the corner and do an interview? And they were kind of like, yeah, like you can't. So one of the things that I had to do was a gin tasting, and they were like, you can't really drink gin in here. So I was like, that's okay, that's fine, I'm sure they'll understand. So yeah, I did my interview in an M&S cafe in Cornwall, and the four ladies on the table next to me got a free Tanqueray training.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to go back and thank them and say, because of you, I have this amazing role.
They did giggle
You and your
after
Wi-Fi.
me, and they were like, "How did it go?" I was like, "I think it went well." They were like, "You did sound good. We'd give you the job." I was like, "Okay."
Fabulous, fabulous. And so what has this first month been like?
It's been difficult, I guess, like up and down. There's like so many aspects to learning a new job that is something that I don't know how to do yet. Obviously, Diageo is a really big company as well, so there's so many people that work for it. So there's a lot of trying to figure out like who you go to for what. And obviously, in the current climate with things opening and closing and rules and regulations changing every sort of week or 2 weeks at the moment, it feels like there's been a lot of, trying to sort of adapt to things very quickly. Luckily, we managed to get some events on for London Cocktail Month, which we've had. So I did my first masterclass last week, which was really fun. And we've had some live music nights. So hopefully we can keep those going for the rest of the month.
Yeah, now, for those who might not know your name, which if they're in the drinking world, I don't know how they could, obviously had one of the most, or in a position in one of the most important bars in the world, the Savoy. You were the first woman in 100 years to be senior bartender, which is incredible. And you've also written a book about fizzy drinks.
Yes.
Yes, let's get physical. Now you've gone on totally the opposite side. And I was just wondering what you learned during your time at the Savoy that might have helped you or prepared you for your new role.
I guess probably one of the best things that you learn at the Savoy is like the very dynamic of guests, and like there's so many different people that come in and just sort of like really adaptive service, from like really super high end big spenders that need everything to be absolutely perfect, to like, your regulars, your cocktail mates or other bartenders, whatever, that just want to come in, like have a beer and have a chat and, have a really relaxed time. So I think that's probably like one of the parts of my career that have set me up for this job as well, is that I've worked across like a lot of different sides of the trade. So obviously from 5-star Savoy. Before that, I was at a place called Porto in Leeds. It was like a late night rock and roll dive bar. And then I started at a place called Arc Inspirations, which is kind of maybe somewhere in the middle.
And now you are going to be working with only one spirit. Before it was masses of everything, really much. Anything that was behind the bar, you could do. Also a spirit that is one of the first ever, really, that has been recorded. Definitely one of the first gins in the world. So there's a lot of history towards that on top of your shoulders already. You're, promoting this brand that has been around for, a good.
Yeah, no pressure.
Right, exactly. Is it difficult to think in that, okay, I've only got one gin to work with here now, whereas, to be creative, where I had tons before.
I've always been a gin girl. So like, I don't think I'd have the like passion or knowledge to be like a whiskey or a rum ambassador, for example. If the opportunity arose for me to be a brand ambassador, it always would have been for a gin in my mind. Either that or like maybe champagne, but definitely not knowledgeable enough about that. But yeah, so I think that's like one of the things that excited me most about the prospect of the job is, is really something that I wanted to do at some point. Okay, maybe my plan was to sort of try and roll into advocacy a few years later. I had a few more things that I wanted to like tick off on my list, a bit more sort of travel and exploration and opening the New York bar. But what it is. And like, you have to just sort of adapt to the climate, I guess. And like, as a backup plan or a silver lining, like I'm in a really good place. Like I'm really happy with where I've landed. And I feel very fortunate to have bagged such an amazing job in the current climate.
Yes, I'm sure. Now, I don't think you're doing yourself any justice when you say you couldn't have worked with champagne, but a brand ambassador, because you did write a book that is all fizzy cocktails here. So tell me a little bit about how this book even came about, because it is so beautiful and I've made lots of these drinks and it's really a fun book.
So Let's Get Physical kind of really started. DK, the publishing company, approached me in January 2018 or 17, no, 18, and wanted to partner with someone for champagne and cocktails or a fizzy cocktails book for the general public. So the book's very much aimed at, present for your aunt or mum or whoever, not for bartenders, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely a consumer book.
It's supposed to be accessible and fun and have little snippets of factual, but mostly fun and easy to make drinks. So I actually thought, when I first got the email, I remember thinking that it was spam or I was really acting suspicious about it. And I sent it to my mum and she was like, do you even know what DK is? And I was like, not really. I think I had some children's books that had DK in the corner, but don't really know that much about it. My mum's like, they're a really big publishing company. So I Googled it and they were 2 or 3 doors down from the Savoy on the Strand. And my face had been popping up in the press quite a lot at that point. So they had sort of cottoned on to me and they were like, look, this would be a really nice partnership. You're close by. So it would mean it would be really easy, for us all to sort of support each other in the making. So I was like, sod it, I'll go for it. It sounds like a lot of work. And I think I underestimated how much work it would be for the next 7 months of my life. But yeah.
But now you have this fabulous book.
Published, yeah.
And what's interesting to me is that, so you said, hey, it's a Lush Life episode. We have to get a little bit of your background in there. I just can't help myself. That you worked at a place called Oporto.
Yeah.
And now you're brand ambassador for one of the most famous brands in the world. When you started working at Oporto, did you ever even conceive of did you go into it conceiving what this drinks world was or where you could go and how you could make such a career out of it?
No, definitely, absolutely not. I didn't. I guess probably quite a lot of people, the industry chose me. I didn't choose it, if that makes sense. Sort of love of all things that sort of grew over time. I was very sure, from quite a young age, that when it came to sort of choosing a job, the two things that I wanted were to be able to travel and to love my job. I didn't want to ever get stuck in a position where you're sat behind a desk that you hate going to work on Monday. And I think eventually, although I did sport and exercise science at uni, and I thought that sports or maybe physiotherapy or something would be the route that I would go down. My sort of passion and love for the industry just kind of took over. And I think probably at the Savoy was when I realized that these people that are hospitality professionals are so incredibly good at what they do. Mm-hmm. And that's what I want to be a part of. And I think I remember thinking about halfway through, so maybe 2017, 2018, there was a really significant drop in people asking, is this your full-time job? Or what else do you do? Are you studying? Are you just doing this basically as a second to doing something else?
Wait, was that at the Savoy?
Yeah, so
really, they would ask it there?
Yeah, lots of people still. You'd be surprised. I think also possibly in America the culture's a bit different. Where throughout university, a lot more people get jobs to fund themselves more in that way. So there are a lot of people that work in hospitality as maybe a second,
right, of course,
rather than a main career. But yeah, there's definitely a point where that sort of significantly dropped and stopped happening, which was great.
You're yes. How many times do I have to say yes? Can I wear a t-shirt? Yes, I work at the Savoy. And this is my only job and this is the job I want. Now, coming from a sports background, was it difficult to learn about, taste and food and putting together of flavors? Because, you have created tons of recipes for this book and I'm sure for Tanqueray and for everything that you've done. Was that a tough learning curve for anyone who wanted to, to start
Yeah, I guess there's a lot of information out there, though, isn't there? If you look in the right places, like as an industry, the bar world sort of looks to the chefs and culinary for inspiration a lot because they're kind of, a bit ahead of us in the flavor and just the whole game, I guess. So I think a lot of my sort of initial learning was looking to food and to like sort of the herbal world for inspiration. And then also like, I think I've just been really fortunate to work with some really incredible people as well, and really experienced people that have given you like a really good foundation of how to do stuff. I think when you're learning in the bar industry, like a lot of what is helpful is watching and learning from other people, and also, just sort of experimenting and getting stuff wrong as well. Not being afraid to try and then taste something and be like, oh, that's gross, let's not do that again.
And gosh, if there aren't greats at the Savoy, there are no greats anywhere, really. You really were at the, it's the creme de la creme. It is, one of the great places in the world.
Yeah. Erik's drinks, like, still just blow my mind, like, even like now in Quant. And like, I've got all of our menus and our training manuals from the last sort of 5 years, so it's really great to look through them for like inspiration. And Erik's just got like a phenomenal palate and he's super creative. I think his aunt or his great aunt was a herbalist as well, so you'll see like in a lot of his drinks there's a lot of sort of fresh and herby ingredients that he really knows how to work with amazingly well.
So what is exciting you now for the future with Tanqueray?
Well, we have loads of really fun stuff coming up next year, hopefully, depending on guidance and, what happens. London Cocktail Week's been really fun. It's been really nice to have some live music nights as well, trying to sort of support the music industry as well that have taken a bit of a hit this year. I have some really fun things coming around into Christmas, which I can't talk about just yet. But yeah, next year will be really big as you won't be able to miss what we're doing.
Well, we're definitely going to have some Christmas news on the show. So you'll definitely have to keep me posted and we will toast to Christmas. So it has been great touching base with you. I really appreciate you being on the show and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad we managed to make it all work this time.
Yay, Virgin Wi-Fi. I couldn't leave Pippa without asking for her top tips for the home bartender and where she would have a drink right now if she could choose anywhere in the world.
So top tips, probably just get really experimental. We've all spent a lot of time at home this year and drinking at home. And I think it's a really good time for you to experiment, like what flavors and what drinks like are truly your own favorites. Like a lot of the time as a bartender, you're making drinks for other people. So, cherish yourself, discover your favorites instead.
Fabulous. If you could drink anywhere in the world right now, where would that be and what would you have?
I hope I'm going to pronounce this right, but Bani Kang, who is global world-class winner last year, she just opened her bar recently, I think the beginning of this year or a few months ago, called Moo in Taipei. And that is like so high up on my list of places that I can't wait to go to. She gave me a t-shirt last week, actually, which I've been wearing far too much. So I'm a big fangirl of Bani. I remember like so clearly in my head, and I always will, her standing on stage like as they're doing the final announcement. And she already had 2 trophies in her hand for winning 2 of the challenges. And her face was just like both terrified and amazing. Because I think she kind of knew by that point it was obvious who was going to win. And yeah, I just think she's incredible. And I can't wait to go and visit her bar and support.
Oh gosh, I can't wait to join you there. As the days get cooler here in London and the clocks have gone back an hour, I've been making more and more Negronis. So how perfect that it would be our cocktail of the week. Somehow the combination of gin, Campari, and sweet vermouth works so well. And when you're starting with Tanqueray, well then it's called our cocktail of the week, the Tanqueray Negroni. Add just 25 mils of Tanqueray London Dry Gin, 25 mils of Campari, and 25 mils of sweet vermouth to a mixing glass. Stir well, and then strain into a rocks glass full of ice. Then you mustn't forget to garnish with an orange peel. I make sure to wipe the glass with the orange peel before placing it into the glass. You'll find this recipe, plus more Tanqueray Gin recipes and all the cocktails of the week at alushlifemanual.com, where you'll find all the ingredients in our shop. To be honest, it took me a while to love a Negroni. But it was all thanks to Bar Termini in London Soho that I was converted. They serve them in these tiny Nicanor glasses so you can sample a classic one or any of their signature riffs on the classic. I think every bar should have a tasting menu so you can sample new ones before committing to a full serving. It makes sense, no? If you live for Lush Life, make sure you are giving back to the bars you love by donating or taking part in cocktail delivery where you live. Theme music for Lush Life is by Steven Shapiro and used with permission. And Lush Life is always and will be forever produced by Evo Terra and Simpler Media Productions. Which leads me to say the wise words of Oscar Wilde, all things in moderation, including moderation. And always drink responsibly and wash your hands and wear a mask. Next week, we meet the man who guards over my grandmother's favorite spirit. Until that time, bottoms up.